Okay, so here we are given a right triangle and we're given two sides and we're asked to find the measure of one of the angles. So we're definitely going to wind up using SOHCAHTOA. Alright, that's just to remind us of the trig function definitions. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine equals adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. That reminds us of that. But before we begin, you need to understand there are three possible ways that equations can go. I'm just making up these numbers just as an example. In fact, maybe I'll slide off to the side. Here are the three possibilities. Let's see, I'm just going to use the sine function. Say if I have the sine of some angle is equal to x over 20. Okay, that's one type of equation. On the other hand, say if I have the sine of 40 is equal to 20 over x. That's the second type of equation. And then the final type of equation would be like this. The sine of x is equal to 40 over 20. Or let's say 20 over 40. Anyway, depending on which situation you're in will determine how you will approach the equation. So when the variable is in the top, we're going to multiply. Okay, when the variable is in the bottom, we are going to swap. And when the variable is inside the trig function, we are going to perform the inverse. Okay, what in the world am I talking about? I'm glad you asked. So if the variable is in the top, alright, I'm trying to get x by itself, all I have to do is multiply by 20 on both sides. Alright, that's going to cancel these out, and then that gives me x equals 20 sine 40. Alright, I could just put that in my calculator and that would give me the answer. Okay, now on this problem, so that's what I mean when I say multiply. Swap. Well, it turns out you can swap these. You can swap the denominator with this thing that's out here by itself, and you get a new equation that still works. So you would get x equals 20 over sine 40. And you could just type this in your calculator and that would be the answer. Now inverse, so when the variable is inside the trig function, then in that case the variable is equal to the inverse trig function of the number that you have. Alright, so in this case x would equal the inverse sine of 20 over 40. And you can put this in your calculator as well. Okay, and the way you would put that in your calculator is by doing, you'd have to go second sine of 20 divided by 40. Okay, and which in this case happens to turn out to be 30 degrees. So x would equal 30 degrees. Alright, so if the variable is in the top, you multiply. If the variable is in the bottom, you swap. If the variable is inside the trig function, it equals the inverse trig function. Alright, so every time you do a SOHCAHTOA problem, you have to ask yourself, which one of those situations are we in? Okay, so what is the measure of angle A? So this is the angle that we have to focus our eyes on. So start with the hypotenuse. Label that. So here's the hypotenuse right here. It's always across from the 90-degree angle. Now the side that's right next to the angle is adjacent. and then the side that's across from the angle is opposite. Now, which one of these sides is doing nothing? It has no number, and we're not looking for it. Well, that's the adjacent side. All right, the adjacent side is doing absolutely nothing. We're not looking for it. We have no number. So you can forget about any trig function that involves adjacent. See the A? All right, that just leaves sine. Oh yeah, by the way, so I put these two little marks here. I probably should just go ahead and put an X here because that's what we're looking for, angle A. Okay, so we're going to do the sine function because that's the only one that does not involve the useless adjacent side. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So we will say the sine of x, or I could have just said A, is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. So that's going to be 9 over 18. So remember, when the variable is inside, all right, do we multiply, swap, or inverse? Well, this is when we do the inverse. All right, so that's why I'm going to do x is equal to the inverse sine of 9 over 18. Okay, I accidentally picked an example that's going to happen to give me the exact same answer. I didn't mean to do that, but it's fine. So I will do the inverse sine of, what did I say, 9 over 18? 9 divided by 18. And that's going to be 30 degrees again. So that tells me that x is equal to 30 degrees. So this is the answer right here. Let's check it out. Kabam!